Hello, and welcome to my study once again. I'm Rory, I'm the minister of the Methodist Church in Haxby and Wigginton, and a year ago, as we journeyed towards Easter, none of us would have foreseen in any way still being in various forms of lockdown, unable to gather in our church certainly through this week, unable to wrestle together, travel together through the peaks and valleys of the story of the last week of the life of Jesus as he enters Jerusalem and ends up on the cross on Easter, Good Friday, and then our celebration on Easter Sunday of the resurrection. It's been quite a year, and I think a year ago many of us were feeling resolved and resolute and pushing through what was the beginnings of what we thought would be a couple of weeks or months, which has now turned into a very long time. And I know how much sadness there is in my church community's life about not being able to gather in person this week. But each day I'm going to be offering in the morning, like this, a short video reflection on the reading set for today in the Gospel. We're in John's Gospel, the fourth of the Gospels of Jesus, telling the story of the life of Jesus and journeying our way through just some of the stories of this week in the life of Jesus until Friday at least, and then again back on Sunday morning. Today's story is in John chapter 12. My apologies if I cough during this, but my son delightfully brought home a cold from school and spent 3 days off school last week. Gave it to Rebecca, gave it to me, and I'm just getting rid of the last bits of it. But I do cough every now and then, so apologies if I do. John chapter 12. Preceding this, Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead. We have that story just in John's Gospel and in this story as well, which follows. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus entered Bethany, where Lazarus, so recently raised from the dead, was living. Lazarus and his sisters invited Jesus to dinner at their home, and Martha served. Lazarus was one of those sitting at the table with them. Mary came in with a jar of very expensive aromatic oils, anointed and massaged Jesus' feet, and then wiped them with her hair. The fragrance of the oils filled the house. Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, even then getting ready to betray him, said, "Why wasn't this oil sold and the money given to the poor? It would have easily brought 300 silver pieces." He said this not because he cared 2 cents about the poor, but because he was a thief. He was in charge of their common funds, but also embezzled them. Jesus said, "Let her alone. She's anticipating and honoring the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you. You don't always have me." Word got out among the Jews that Jesus was back in town, and the people came to take a look, not only at Jesus, but also at Lazarus, who'd been raised from the dead. So the high priests plotted to kill Lazarus, because so many of the Jews were going over and believing in Jesus on account of him. So reading from, it's not that new, but Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of the Bible, the Message, his paraphrase of the New Testament written in contemporary language, trying to cut through some of the sort of academic detail of literal translation. It's a powerful story. It's a powerful story because it talks about rich and poor. It asks us what the value is of things and what things are most valuable. It's an incredibly intimate story in the presence of other people. Mary comes in and she doesn't just anoint his feet, doesn't just perfume his feet, but then unbinds her hair and uses her hair to wipe his feet. A deeply uncomfortable moment, I'm sure, for some of those who were present. Maybe that's part of Lazarus's reaction. Part of Judas's reaction. He struggles with the intimacy of this. Of course, in John's Gospel, like in the others, this passage is setting setting Judas up as the one who will betray Jesus, and quite intentionally, we're given an insight in this passage into Judas's character. Got it right that time. Judas's character. You see, but he seems to say the sensible thing. Surely this is wasteful. Surely this is an incredibly valuable jar of oil, of ointment, of perfume. Why isn't it being used for a good purpose, like helping the poor? Jesus seems to say quite selfishly, "Well, I'm the most important thing happening right now, and the poor will always be there." But there's more to it than that. Jesus perhaps is alluding to an Old Testament passage in some of the earliest writings of the Old Testament, where the wisdom literature says the poor will always be there. There will always be cause for generosity towards those who are less fortunate. In 1997, MasterCard was losing ground to Visa in the bank card stakes, the fairly new and developing and becoming more sophisticated electronic world of banking. And they came up with a slogan which endures still. Had a series of adverts which said, "Some things are priceless, but for everything else, there's MasterCard." Bit of genius there, which has found its way across all kinds of emotive adverts about the things that really matter, and then a credit card at the end. This is a passage about money. It is about value. It is about the way we apportion value. It is about the simple fact that in a pandemic we find ourselves in arguments with others and watching arguments happen endlessly about the right thing to do. And the right thing is almost always underpinned somehow by the financial cost of either vaccinating or not vaccinating, of locking down or not locking down, of opening up or not opening up. Fundamentally, there is an inescapable economic underpinning to this conversation about human life and about human liberty, and about what it means to be free, to decide for ourselves, even though those choices obviously have impacts on other people. I don't know what it's been like for you this week to look at images of a container ship 400 meters long and the height of a 20-story building stuck in the Suez Canal. The images of an enormous digger, dwarfed by the size of the bow of the ship as it tries to dig away a little bit where the ship is stuck in the front, have been ridiculed and are laughable in some ways. But the sheer scale of the vessel, the fact of it's nearly $10 billion American dollars, about 6.5–7 billion pounds worth of trade being lost every day because the Suez Canal is blocked, is a staggering thing to think about. I don't know what's on that container ship. I know there are a lot of containers. I do know that I've ordered a few things through an astronomy supplier in the UK, just a couple of things I want for my telescope. And maybe those things are sitting in one of those containers, finding their way stuck in the Suez Canal, or they're in one of the ships behind it that can't get through for who knows how long. But images like that should stop us, not just because we think it's extraordinary that we're capable of building things like that, aren't we clever, but because they say something about value and what we value, and about quite how caught up we are in a consumer society. See, Judas can only measure the value of the perfume in what it's financially worth, at least in the way that we have the story told. Jesus points him beyond that, not to shine some holy, amazing light on himself, but he does essentially say, some things are priceless. Some things are priceless. We also mustn't discount the fact that for Mary, wherever she's got this perfume from, this is an enormously sacrificial and costly thing to do, as she honors intimately the loving nature of this godly man, who is God, in a way that they're still to discover. There's so much going on in the story. And as we start Holy Week, as we begin to think about this week, as we recognize excuse me, that throughout the church's history, as we try to make sense of these events and the death and resurrection of Jesus, we've almost always tried to end up writing some kind of equation that tells us where the value lies, how much Jesus' life is worth, how much our lives are worth before and after the resurrection in God's life. We've almost always tried to capture this passage somehow, this story, as one that is about balancing an equation, paying a debt. The language always has what's kind of economic undertones to it. We start this week with an act of extravagance, extravagant love, extravagant gratitude that is received by God in Jesus as a gift. And as we think about container ships stuck in the Suez Canal, as we think about the health economics of a pandemic, as we think about the money we have, and how we feel so differently about what constitutes a bargain, depending on depending on the direction we're facing. Value for money. As we think about our church's life beyond this coronavirus pandemic, and the very real fact of us having having financial responsibilities, paying staff, meeting our assessment as part of a wider collective agreement to with Methodist churches in the greater vicinity of York, help each other to be as alive as we can. As we think about those things, this passage asks us to, with Mary, consider what it means to express great love with the things that we have. And perhaps to recognize that there is a bit of Judas in all of us, insofar as we think it is responsible adults to always be counting the cost of things and budgeting carefully and turning over every penny, asking what capital there is really in love, and how much it might set us back, and whether that's worth it or not. Maybe it's the intimacy of this that is most challenging for us. It is the up close and personal nature of this moment that is hardest, because we find it difficult to imagine ourselves doing something quite so intimate, quite so publicly, as an act of love and gratitude and kindness and blessing. Now, this isn't suggesting that beyond Easter we should all go out and wash people's feet with our hair. Not in the slightest. I don't have much hair anyway, so I wouldn't do a very good job. But it is asking us, as a passage, to think about what it means to show great love. And Mary gets that and does that. And Jesus affirms that because he knows that he is in the process of doing that himself in his journey towards Jerusalem, towards the cross and beyond. So bless you on Monday of Holy Week. I'll be back tomorrow with another short reflection and offer you those thoughts for today as we live with images of container ships, precious jars of perfume, deeply intimate moments, and whatever this pandemic feels like for you right now, whatever it has cost you, cost us, and however we think we will bear that alone and together. Loving God, bless us as we start our journey with you towards Easter this Monday. We don't know what the future will look like. We do know that it will be less than our lives have been before in so very many ways, especially economically. And we ask you to help us to let this Easter continue reshaping our ideas, our thoughts, our feelings, our shared values around what matters most and what is most valuable. And to look at what we have and ask how we might pour your love out on the world in the way that Mary pours out her precious perfume on your feet.